we had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning now. Okay, as we have an apparent serious oxygen leak. 4, 3, 2, 1. Houston, we've had a problem. He's in a roll and he can't stop it. Performing an evasive maneuver. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. Welcome to space.
Hello, listener, and welcome to Failure to Launch, the space history podcast where we walk you through every mistake, failure, and explosion that made modern space exploration possible. We are your hosts, Quinn,
Chris,
and Undead Chris.
And today we are joined by Nicholas Slayton to talk about Balloonomania.
Hey, guys.
Hello. So, Nicholas Slayton is a journalist and contributing editor at Task and Purpose, focusing on breaking news, the Middle East, history, and UAPs. Also the author of Let's Do the Panic Again newsletter. Nicholas, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Happy to be here.
This is going to be a bit of a diversion from our normal topics because we are a space history podcast, and this isn't exactly space. We are broadening our horizons. Sue us.
What do you mean? This has a little bit to do with space,
yeah, it's,
right?
it's not for lack of trying.
They'd have gone if they could.
I would consider the inception of manned flight to be part of space, right?
Yes.
You wouldn't be getting to space if you weren't flying terrestrially. So
Yeah, it's the mythical Chinese rocket guy who tried to launch himself into space.
Oh, Wanhu.
Yeah, it's Wanhu. It's the balloon guys.
King.
It's
Everyone's
D2 rockets. It's space. It's like a linear project.
Yeah.
I think bad things happening to people who go up is like the gist of our work so far.
It's in our area, and if you think about it, you get high enough with a balloon, you are edging space.
At the end of the day, an aeronaut and an astronaut, I mean, there's enough similarities there.
Yeah, they both go up.
It's basically the same. You got head protection, national flag, you even got the white uniform. It's all there.
Was there an aeronaut Leica? I gotta ask.
Oh, God, yes, actually.
Oh, God damn it.
Did not get baked alive, though.
Okay.
We will get to that. So the actual answer is that balloons were basically the space travel of their time. They were humanity's first successful attempt to conquer all of the up that's up there. And like with space, the first pioneers of this new field weren't government scientists or military leaders. They were eccentric inventors. When they eventually carried people, those people were brash young risk takers, and they invariably landed as celebrities.
they got the right stuff.
They had the right stuff. We will talk about this. They have the right stuff. Basically, history is a flat circle, and everything that happened with space exploration was done 150 years prior.
That's terrifying considering what I know from this show.
Yeah, and that nothing has ever been learned. Nothing will be learned. Everything will continue happening exactly as it does. So for sourcing, I am mostly going to be using the book The Aeronauts, as well as the book The Early Age of Ballooning. As always, all links will be in the show notes.
The first balloons.
So, Jacques Etienne and Joseph Montgolfier were a pair of rich dipshit brothers in the late 17th century in France. And I mean rich. The Montgolfier family had been in the paper-making business for over 400 years, and their factory had been named a Royal Manufactory, making it the sole paper provider for the French king and government. The two brothers, scions of the family, had fuck-around money and free access to a textiles factory. A dreamer and inventor from a young age, but hopeless in business, Joseph had a fascination with flight. When he was a young man, he took to building parachutes and jumping off the family estate, apparently not killing himself in the process.
That's a good start.
Yeah.
Did they have parachutes in general before that?
No. A fun actual kind of aerospace thing, parachutes were only invented like 50 years after the balloon was, in response to all of the people who died.
So he had foresight.
Yeah. He's like, I'm not going up there without some kind of safety.
Yeah, I want to say it was like early 1900s. The Austrian French guy jumped off the Eiffel Tower with a air quotes parachute and just cratered. So how this guy was landing is a miracle.
Yes, I saw that in A View to a Kill.
Well, I mean, he was jumping off of like the 1-2-story house. He was not diving off the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, true. And if you're young enough, your bones are made of rubber.
So basically with these brothers, Joseph was the inventor and Etienne was the business guy. He knew how to actually take these inventions and like get them out to people. He knew how to advertise. There's also a lot of dumb legends around this story. According to the legends and Wikipedia, Joseph first discovered the lifting properties of heat when he watched his wife's underwear billow while hanging under a fire to dry. So he was just like mesmerized watching the panties. This latent horniness then pushed him to think bigger and develop the modern hot air balloons that we know and love. Unfortunately, this is a lie.
Damn, so his wife wasn't stacked, is what you're saying.
No, she was insufficiently stacked for her underwear to have inspired the invention of the hot air balloon.
Damn it, I was hoping for like small domino, horny French guy, big domino, F-22s shooting up balloons.
Don't worry, we'll get there.
A phrase that fills me with both fear and anticipation.
Latent horniness.
Not latent horniness.
Okay.
Look, I'm not French, okay? It takes more than that.
When the Montgolfiers started their flight experiments, they were just the latest in a long line of inventors going back 2,000 years, all trying to solve the same problem. See, way back, Archimedes laid out that when immersed in a fluid or gas, an object is buoyed by a force equal to the weight it displaces. Therefore, a balloon filled with something lighter than air would rise up until its weight matches that of the air around it. For 2,000 years, no one was able to put this into practice, mostly just because they lacked a lifting substance. They didn't have anything lighter than air. That changed in 1766 with the discovery of phlogiston, or inflammable air, or hydrogen, as we know it today. On top of being violently explosive, this new gas also weighed 14 times less than air. Being a learned man, Joseph had read about it and figured that it was the key to the ancient balloon riddle.
Also, sorry, I was muted. Did you say inflammable air and hydrogen?
Inflammable air was the earlier name for hydrogen. Or they also called it phlogiston.
I don't like any of those names. It's hydrogen. I can't accept it. It's icky. Yeah. Icky is certainly the best way to put it.
So their first experiments with hydrogen failed miserably, mostly because the gas simply escaped their tiny paper balloons. And this is actually something the rockets have to deal with today. Hydrogen molecules are incredibly tiny, and they can just phase through most kind of metal tanks that can hold them. This is called bleed off. And as you can imagine, with a paper balloon, the hydrogen is just going to like phase right through that stuff like it's nothing. Another issue was getting enough hydrogen to even inflate a balloon. See, back then, hydrogen was still new, and producing it in industrial quantities was a very complicated and dangerous process that basically just involved pouring huge drums of concentrated sulfuric acid over piles of iron shavings.
Totally safe environment.
Yeah.
We're circling back to another common show facet, horrific chemistry.
Horrific chemistry being done with no safety, except because this is the 1700s, it's a fair bet that a 12-year-old is doing this.
Imagine if the French accidentally created hypergolic fuels in like the 19th century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the Montgolfier balloon had reached the stratosphere.
Yeah, it's because they pushed a kid into the hydrogen pit.
Yeah.
Like they invented red fumic nitric acid, but like it gets lost in the chaos of the French Revolution and the wars.
Yeah. Napoleon bans it because he thinks it's for pussies. Trying to find a lifting agent that wouldn't escape like hydrogen had, the Montgolfier brothers settled on smoke. See, Joseph was kind of right for the wrong reasons. He saw that hot air rose and could exert a force on objects in doing so, but he just thought that smoke was its own lighter than air substance. He didn't understand that like heat was the operator here. So he just thought that like if we fill the balloon with smoke, it'll rise.
Density is a foreign concept.
Exactly. Well, I mean, yeah. On the other hand, he was right for the wrong reasons. This works. So the brothers start experimenting with mini hot air balloons, which work fantastically. Over the first half of 1783, they refined their designs, watching unmanned balloons fly higher and higher over southern France.
It must have been so weird for the people who see this. Like, just the farmers up in France, you see that.
Hold that thought. We're going to get to some really fun reactions. But yeah, I do agree completely. Like, you're just farming your field and then something comes flying through the air and then maybe like the weird dipshit Montgolfier twins run over.
Well, it's also 1783. You're probably poor as hell, angry at the government, and then you see some weird shit happen. You're like, end of days.
You see the rich kids are like, yeah, just firing paper into the sky.
My first and only thought is French monarchy area 51.
You know there's some freaky shit there.
There's just like a wooden UFO.
Some of it is like the Habsburg jaw that's like also the xenomorph.
No, that's where they're building the French competitor.
Then there's a little green man with Habsburg jaw.
And he is the heir to the throne.
They're designing hair curls that can stop a 32 Colt pistol round.
Wait, this is just Roger from American Dad.
But French. It's beautiful.
I'm sure he's French at some point in the show. So one interesting thing is that balloons were basically their own advertising. People would see them flying through the sky, they would go and investigate, they would tell people about it, and the story would spread like wildfire, which the balloons occasionally did set off. It wasn't long before the brothers were entertaining huge crowds at their launches. They even funded their research by charging some guests to see the balloons lift off. The newspapers did the rest, taking the news from provincial rumors to the courts of French nobility in Paris. Joseph and Etienne became so famous that they received a summons from King Louis XVI to come demonstrate their balloons for him in Versailles. So this is their big break.
They're making it big.
And I want to be clear here. They started, like, this is all over the course of like a month or two. This takes off incredibly quick.
They made it. I mean, to be fair, like they were already loaded and didn't need an investment.
Yeah. But now they're famous.
I started a balloon company with a small loan from my father. I did everything myself.
I'm just assuming that they get guillotined in like 6 years. For all, like, this is just putting a target on their back historically.
Yeah.
Listen, they were already in line thanks to their family.
Flying over Paris with the balloon with your face on it. Just look at
me. No, just like the mobs break in. You're just like, quick, get more smoke up in the thing. We gotta get away. And just like trying to like, come on, how much more fuel do we have? They're right there. Come on, guys.
Money.
I'm thinking about the balloon, but it's like a giant stretched out version of his face.
Wait, they were already going to be guillotined thanks to their family. Now they're getting turbo guillotined. They're stacking them one on top of the other.
I feel like if any oligarchs could survive the revolution, it'd be the paper guys. Come on, you're not getting rid of the paper guys.
Why do you think they're trying to get to space? It's because guillotines don't work in space.
Oh, this is just the 1700s equivalent of billionaires going to Mars. They're just trying to go to the clouds to get away from
to break through the firmament, yeah.
Brother, we're not going to get into heaven the normal way. We need to break in. We need to get above those clouds.
And freeze to death.
No, we are not taking mom and dad.
Float and dethrone God.
I will send a picture later. I don't have it in the slides, but there's actually a picture of like a balloonist meeting God in his balloon.
No, float and dethrone God. That has to be an enamel pin.
Yeah. So, yeah, they have made it big, but there are still a lot of unknowns about flight. Like we've talked about often on this show, when it comes to aerospace medicine, like people just did not know. There were fears that humans would asphyxiate or freeze at high altitude, and the high altitude here is like 100 feet up. Never mind the fact that like people had climbed to the tops of mountains, like higher than these balloons were ever going to go. And so, for the first flight, like Laika and the Alberts 150 years later, they would fly with test animals, a sheep, a chicken, and a duck. Etienne and Joseph believed that these three species like perfectly covered the entire flight spectrum. The sheep was a land animal that'd basically be the proxy human. The duck was a flying animal that was expected to handle the altitude fine, and the noble chicken was the perfect middle ground, a landlocked bird only capable of short hops. I love the 1700s scientific method, because like you can kind of understand their logic, you can kind of follow it, and it's just like, yes, the chicken, the perfect middle ground between the sheep and the duck.
I mean, God bless the 60s and 70s, but the area of science we're talking about, that's
you mean the 1760s and 70s? Which ones?
No, the 1960s and 70s, that's when we, hit the apex. But right now, we're in that peak Mercury brain science.
I love how like every century has its like heavy metal poisoning.
These guys have permanent blood loss from paper cuts. Their brains are not firing at all cylinders.
And these are rich guys too. Like,
oh yeah.
I mean, maybe they're worse because they're rich. They have like access to a really good mercury.
Yeah, they can afford the lead-lined pipes. So, after setting up in Versailles, the brothers launched their balloon on September 19th, 1783. It was a massive hot air balloon, with the animals dangling below in a wicker cage and filled with a fire of old shoes and rotten meat.
That must have smelled great.
Yeah, and they were demonstrating this for the king, so I have no idea why they picked the rotten meat and old shoes.
Use what you got. Maybe that's why the chicken was chosen. It's like, well, we're going to use this other animal, but oh well.
We were going to use this chicken, but it's been dead for weeks.
Well, no. You're also testing dead flesh. Like you got live, middle, flying, dead.
It is still dead.
Will God's light reanimate this flesh?
Etienne jotting down notes quickly.
Genius, brother.
Now, our best guess is that the balloon reached around 1,700 feet and came down 2 miles from the starting point. When they went to rescue the crew, Etienne described it like this.
The animals were fine, and the sheep had pissed in the cage.
Aerospace medicine right there. There were also some reports that the chicken was injured, and everybody was just like, oh my God, did the flight do that? Until a witness came forward and just said like, no, the sheep kicked it and broke its wing.
It was so early, I couldn't possibly expect them to have any kind of flight safety standard as to like, here's where your crew compartments are, sheep. You stay in that one.
They didn't even train it. They didn't give it banana pellets. It didn't even pull any levers. Why even bother? On the other hand, they survived, and that is more than can be said for a lot of space test animals.
Well, I mean, like, was this like one of those like classic wicker basket hot air balloon things, or was it like you're in a cage and it's like obscure around? Like, can you tell if they're ascending or not?
Probably not. They didn't have windows or anything. It was just meant to test like, is 1,700 feet up going to like turn these animals inside out?
So they're just in that cage getting wiggled around.
And then crashing pretty hard, presumably. About 2 months later, the Montgolfiers were back and ready for round 2. They had built a bigger balloon than ever and fitted it with an actual gondola. Their plan was to launch a pair of humans to the untold heights of maybe a couple hundred feet.
Uh-oh.
When they'd first announced the plan, King Louis had insisted that those humans be convicts, so if the balloon crashed, nothing would be lost.
I was literally going to ask, this is like some like poor peasants, like pre-revolution? It's like, oh yes, you don't matter, you die.
And it actually gets dumber because this really pisses off a dude named François Pilatre de Rosier. Not because he cared about their well-being, but because he was offended that the idea that the first men to fly would be criminals, and doubly offended that the first men to fly wouldn't be him. Quote, the young nobleman who was best known for having founded the Scientific Museum in Paris was also something of a daredevil. He delighted and alarmed visitors to his museum by inhaling hydrogen and then igniting it as he exhaled. He also possessed courage and coolness in adversity, qualities that would prove important in a balloonist, and a gift for swaying important men. And that last part's going to be the most important. So what Pilatre had was a friend, François Laurent, the Marquis d'Arlandes. And I am going to stick with the French pronunciations. I normally don't do the perfect great pronunciations, but like French is the only one I can somewhat do. So he has a friend, François Laurent, who knew one of Queen Marie Antoinette's maids, and he used those connections to get himself on the flight. So he networks his way in. Laurent agreed to help, but only if he could also ride the balloon. So we now have the first 2 men to fly, and they're just glory-seeking tourists.
Fantastic.
Which is kind of like, like the first people to fly, they weren't the equivalents. It wasn't like the actual inventors like we have for planes. It wasn't trained astronauts and cosmonauts.
It was rich, noble children.
The first people to fly were rich dipshit tourists.
And now if they die, nothing of value will be lost anyway.
Again, I am just waiting for the Montgolfier brothers to get guillotined for revolution. Like this, they're just making it worse themselves every second.
It's going to fly up, it's going to like catch fire and explode, and the revolution is just going to go like, that is the optimal way of killing nobles.
Just drop them.
We're just going to send them up in the flying Viking funeral.
This is just helicopter rides, but centuries early.
Oh, fuck.
Oh.
Napoleon giving guys balloon rides. That is a Gaddafi-ass thing right there.
Would Gaddafi give people balloon rides? I mean, he's crazy enough to do it.
All of my friends use helicopters. I have to do something interesting.
Yeah, he needs that extra little zazz.
But no, we are not here to talk about people being executed. We're here to talk about people almost dying. And so, on November 21st, 1783, in front of a crowd of thousands and the King of France, the first manned balloon in history lifted off from the Bois de Boulogne near Paris. It rose to around 3,000 feet to where all of Paris could see it, and then it caught fire.
Oh.
Yes!
Basically, once they were at altitude, François d'Arlandes noticed that the fire was burning small holes in the balloon, and those holes were spreading fast. Thinking quickly, he grabbed the emergency sponge and performed the world's first emergency aerial firefighting. So I do appreciate that they had planned for that, and yeah, there's just like break-in case of fire, and there's just a wet sponge inside.
Here you go, brother, the moist sponge.
So he's able to put out the fire. And the flight lasts another 25 minutes. That took them over the Seine and 5 miles from where they had lifted off. So they're fighting a fire the whole way. They land, and they are now they land as celebrities, effectively. So balloons were already a sensation at this time. People knew about the previous animal launches. They'd heard about these Montgolfiers. Now it was a revolution. This kicks off, we can laugh at it. This is the first human flight in history ever.
Is it because those 2 people died and now we just have that death love stuff? I want to do it too.
We are going to talk about Pilâtre de Rosiers later, and it's not going to be fun.
I mean, people flying for the first time is objectively cool. It's just that it's rich assholes.
Yes. Rich assholes who were like, no, you can't use convicts, use me. I love that lack of self-preservation. And yeah, we're going to talk about Pilâtre de Rosiers later. He does not get smarter.
As could be expected of one of his station.
Yes. So another early balloon pioneer was Jacques Charles, the inventor of the hydrogen balloon. Now, this is often depicted as him persevering with the idea after the Montgolfier brothers decided it couldn't work, but the actual answer is dumber. See, Charles didn't want to compete with the Montgolfiers, he wanted to copy them. He got funding from the Academy of Sciences in Paris by proposing that he copy their design and thus validate that it worked.
Oh, beautiful. He's got the money pipe.
He got paid to do attempted plagiarism, but the newspaper reports he was reading were wrong. They said that the Montgolfiers had always used hydrogen to inflate their balloons and that they had never switched to hot air. So, confident that he was following in their footsteps, Jacques Charles accidentally invented a whole new way of flying. He succeeded at the thing he didn't know the Montgolfiers had given up on.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He found a way of rubberizing the fabric of his balloon, making it airtight enough to hold the gas, and held a demonstration flight in August of 1783.
So only a couple months later.
Oh, yeah. All of this happens within 1783. I need to be clear, the Montgolfiers go from, flying the equivalent of, those little Chinese hot air balloon, festival things, to flying people within the span of a couple of months. The balloon flew over a crowd of hundreds, including Benjamin Franklin, who paid for a front row seat. It stayed up for 45 minutes and covered about 20 kilometers before crashing near the French town of Gonesse. Quote, "This event took place some distance out in the country, close to a number of peasants, whose terror at the sight and sound of this strange monster from the skies was beyond description. The people assembled, and 2 monks having told them that the burst balloon was the hide of a monstrous animal, they immediately began to assail it vigorously with stones, flails, and pitchforks.
Yes.
The cure of the parish was obliged to walk up to the balloon to reassure his terrified flock. They finally attached the burst envelope to a horse's tail and dragged it across the fields." So they murder the second balloon to ever fly.
There, it comes back again, floating dethroned God.
And in other descriptions, because this is a hydrogen balloon and the process of making it involves sulfuric acid, whenever they pop this thing, it starts spraying rotten egg smelling smoke everywhere. This thing, it sounds like a dragon, the way they describe it. I would be terrified if I were them too.
Oh,
and there's no one on board, right?
No, this is an unmanned balloon.
I mean, thank God they didn't throw a torch at it.
Yeah, thankfully it was during the day. Although you can see in that illustration there, someone is pointing a gun at it.
Never change.
So, despite that setback, Charles was able to ride the fame and build a bigger manned balloon. 10 days after the Montgolfiers' first manned flight, Charles rode his balloon on the second manned flight in human history. So, on top of being incredible scientific achievements and huge leaps forward in human development, these first flights also kicked off a cultural revolution, Balloonomania. And this is what I've been so excited about.
Damn, bro. The ass was fat.
So news of these flights goes through France like a fucking storm. Overnight, balloons became all the rage. The fact that 2 big firsts were achieved in France within 10 days of each other meant that this wasn't just a fluke. This is going to change the world, and France is going to be at the head of this forever. Shops start selling all kinds of balloon-shaped knickknacks. People start buying miniature hydrogen balloons, basically birthday balloons, and just carrying them around town. And the fad even made its way to the stage with plays like The Balloon and Physics Mania. Balloonomania even became part of French fashion, with dresses, jackets, and hats incorporating all kinds of big round poofs, meant to look like the famous balloons.
Oh my God, it's even worse.
And Balloonomania also had a profoundly weird side. I don't know if I'm going to be able to put these slides on YouTube. As aeronautical landmarks were set and surpassed at lightning pace, it also pushed the French to new and innovative levels of horniness. See, as the craze was sweeping France, it also earned its fair share of skeptics and doubters. One of the favorite avenues for mockery was cartoons, and the cartoonists tried to make the balloons look dumb the only way they knew how, by drawing them as women. And you can probably see where this is going.
This was months of payoff for you. You've waited so long to subject us to this.
So they want to make the balloons look dumb. They draw them as women, and this backfires immediately.
Yep.
As Balloonomaniacs decide that they like the cartoons in a weird way they can't describe, and they start drawing their own.
They decided they wanted to fuck the balloon.
Exactly. Quote, many sexually suggestive cartoons soon appeared, the inevitable balloon-breasted girls lifted off their feet, monstrous aeronauts inflated by gas enemas, and inflatable women carrying men off into the clouds.
France creates the aeromorph.
The aero siren.
Hold your horses, because they also...
Oh, no, Quinn, don't go. I know where you're going. Don't go there.
Some particularly horny weirdos were not satisfied with drawing women that looked like balloons, and they went at it from the other direction, drawing anthropomorphized balloons that looked like women, effectively inventing 18th century aeromorphs.
Please stop.
We've made it.
I didn't want psychic damage tonight.
So you can see in the slides, you can go to the next slide if you want.
Yeah, there it is, inflating a
lady.
Oh, this pains me.
God is weeping.
This is what happens when you float into your own God.
God is dead and we have deflated him.
It's just the end of Point Break where Patrick Swayze goes to, like, die by the wave. It's ballooning.
He's just floating up and up.
And, like, French Keanu Reeves on the ground being like, Vaya con Dios, but in French.
The way this starts, this trend is cartoonists trying to make fun of all of, like, the airheaded dipshits who are so into ballooning. And then all of those airheaded dipshits are just like, yo, that's hot.
Yeah, but they're too horny for their own good.
I don't want to get too into the psychoanalysis of stuff I don't understand.
The psychoanalysis of 1870s France.
It is kind of, like, interesting, if not reassuring, that, like, this has always been a thing. Any new development will be met by people being horny about it, and that's historical.
This does not reassure me in the slightest.
I can't imagine how people got how horny people got for the wheel when that was invented. Dude, that must have been like the cave drawings must have been wild.
Is that what they're keeping from us?
I don't want to keep going back to the French Revolution, but, like, Balloonomania, that happened before the Revolution, right?
Yes.
This is one of the underlying causes.
I was going to say, no, this is like putting a whole new spin on, like, Story in the Bastille and all of that now.
Balloonomaniac conspiracy theory that the nobles are hoarding all of the balloon women, and so they have to revolt against them to gain access to this mythical resource.
The hydrogen reserve is being held by the elite.
They're hiding the truth from us.
You just have a bunch of...
Balloonanon.
Sir, I can't even inflate my wife with these wages.
You
get no more. Fuck. Some people come to us for hard-hitting analysis. Sometimes we talk to experts. And sometimes I am the expert. And the subject is inflation porn. I'm cutting that. My coworkers listen to this sometimes.
I'm a professional journalist, so this is just great for me.
I expect a credit if this makes it into the any stories.
I interviewed the Pentagon. Like, I reached out to, like, the Pentagon leadership.
And now you're here.
You have raised your standards to talking to people online about balloon.
We need to get art of the Aeromorph F-22 fighting the Aeromorph Chinese surveillance balloon.
Are you implying that the F-22 pilot may have been hard for balloons on that mission?
It's just like, he's drawing the balloon kill marker on his jet. It's like, why's that balloon got tits, Ed? What?
Don't worry about it.
You didn't get a good look at it. Those were extra sensors.
It's classified. It's just a guy at the Pentagon's, the AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. It's like the guy who's, like, tracks for UFOs, UAPs. And he's just like, yeah, the world's not ready for how horny these UFOs are.
Every one of these UFOs has massive tits. We cannot allow this to get out.
But no, cutting back to it, yeah, that's...
Yeah, we just now found the next big porn hit. Like, some studio should contact us for, like, royalties. Or, like,
exactly. What if we did the X-File? What if we did the triple X-Files?
No.
It has to exist.
I'm suffering right now.
I'm not drunk enough for this.
Listen, the French Revolution, the part they don't tell you, there's just a revolutionary in a basement with a canister of hydrogen and a flintlock, just holding it hostage.
Marie Antoinette just like let them inflate their tits. What do you mean?
Just let them inflate.
The peasants have nothing to inflate themselves with.
King Louis like frantically trying to get the balloon to like lift off, but like they're destroying the palace. It's like mad.
There it is.
Marie is too inflated, so they can't get her out of the castle.
The French royalty goon cave, it's just nothing but those pictures.
Sometimes I wish we get fan art. Listener, do not make fan art of this. Or do.
No, don't. Just don't.
So I do need to rein us in. I do need to deflate some of the fun.
Let us move on from this.
Everybody just breathe out.
Eat a graham cracker and calm yourself down.
Yeah, from now on, we're going to start every episode with breathing exercises. It's just going to be like, audience member, inhale as hard as you can right now. Hyperventilate on the bus. Do it. Now, despite how wild and how quickly Balloonomania became in France, it didn't really take off anywhere else. In fact, across the channel, the English actively hated ballooning and presumably all the horniness that was radiating off of it. There's just like weird balloon porn floating across the channel.
The Italians are like, this is interesting. How do we get more of this?
The first inflatable sex doll just flew across the channel by accident.
I'm amazed that like Pilatre de Rosier didn't make like a giant inflatable sex doll as a balloon.
Enough friction to set off the hydrogen.
Fuck. So yeah, like this is only a France thing at first. Other countries, like some of them are starting to fly their own balloons, but no one is getting as weird about it as the French are. And the English, like, they hate it. They thought it was a dumb fad. They thought it was wasteful, and worst of all, they thought it was French. As one London newspaper put it, every Englishman should, quote, laugh this new folly out of practice as soon as possible. When Benjamin Franklin, a Francophile and by now a veteran balloon weirdo, tried to suggest that the British Royal Society should experiment with balloons, they told him to fuck off and that balloons were, quote, no good whatsoever.
In what context did he say experiment with balloons?
I don't know, but this is one thing that like I feel doesn't get written about enough is just how like much of a Frankaboo Benjamin Franklin was. Admittedly, this is because like at the time of like the American Revolutionary War, France is their big ally.
It's because he's the OG. You just gotta accept it.
And he's also an inventor. So when balloons start happening, Benjamin Franklin is immediately like, he goes out to watch every balloon. He funds a whole bunch of like amateur balloons.
You're not touching upon the fact that this is Benjamin fucking Franklin. The horniest man alive for his time period. And so like his reasoning for his balloon obsession probably veers more into the horniness than the scientific.
And he's also like, in his role going between these different governments, he's trying to pitch this to the British, and they're just like, no, fuck off, weirdo. When the first balloon finally did fly in England, it wasn't even launched by an Englishman, but by an Italian dude named Count Francesco Zambeccari.
I knew it was going to be an Italian guy. I somehow just knew it.
Yeah.
It's because they're French adjacent and still horny enough to get it.
The first Aeronauts.
So, as balloons became incredibly popular in France, it naturally made the people who piloted them into celebrities. Sometimes they were even more famous than the inventors. Sure, people like the Montgolfier brothers had built the balloons, but it took real heroes like Pilatre de Rosier to ride them. Part of the appeal was that balloons always had a level of danger around them. You can't steer a balloon. You can only really control the up and down. Whether you're using hot air or gas, if the balloon breaks, you'll probably fall to your death. The earliest aeronauts exploited this danger to become a class of superstar professional showmen, traveling world capitals and drawing huge crowds of paying customers to watch them almost die. Aeronauts formed fun rivalries, they developed fan clubs, and they were constantly competing with and one-upping each other.
Okay, that slaps.
They immediately develop a kind of like kayfabe thing. It's just like I'm gonna cross the English Channel before my rival. Come watch.
Yes, at this point in time, you're still either going to land in the channel or get, holed by a French peasant with a pickaxe.
And at this point, how safe are we talking about landing? Is it like crash landing?
It's pretty much always going to be crash landing. Your best bet is like the wind is pushing you in a certain direction, and like if you're heading towards a forest, you rise up a little bit, and if you're heading towards a field, you drop down. And then you're going to wind up on someone else's property, but then you're rich and someone comes and picks you up. And There wasn't really any government interest in balloons yet. So all of the scientific progress was being pushed by these young dipshits with massive egos, which is history repeating again.
I was about to make a comment that like nothing has changed. Everything stays the same.
But at least with like astronauts and cosmonauts behind all of the young dipshits with massive egos, there were some actual scientists. This is fully just like whenever these first aeronauts, and aeronauts is what they become called, is like if you're a scientist and you want to do some research, you find your local aeronaut who is like a superstar and you pay him a lot of money and he maybe takes you up in the balloon so you can do some science. But the other risk is that because every time they fly, they're trying to break some new record, you're like probably going to die because he's going to try and fly you into a volcano because someone bet him that he couldn't. So one of the earliest balloon rivalries is between the established champion, Pilote de Rosier, and the up-and-comer Jean-Pierre Blanchard. So de Rosier is the aristocrat. He's the guy we talked about who flew on the first manned flight in history, and he has the backing of the French king funding all of his flights. Not out of any kind of like scientific reasoning, he just gets like whenever he flies first, he gets like a stipend for life. Blanchard, meanwhile, has a rags to riches backstory, an obsession with engineering, and he's freakishly good at marketing his flights. By 1785, just 2 years after the first balloons flew, Blanchard had set himself up as the first professional aeronaut. Cities hire him to visit and fly for their citizens. He's not above painting massive ads on the side of his balloon, and he even sells his accounts of every flight to local newspapers for extra cash. Like, he is the first guy to really figure out how to make this into an entertainment business. So at first, these guys just compete for pretty simple records, flying highest, furthest, that kind of stuff. But if they're going to keep the public excited and the money rolling in, they need some real tangible goals. And what emerged from all of this was a race to see who could cross the English Channel by balloon first. Blanchard decided to set up in England and try flying west to east because the winds are generally more favorable that way, it's easier. De Rosier, meanwhile, set up in France to go east to west, not because he wanted to, but because he was being paid by the King of France, and the flight had to leave France basically for propaganda reasons. In the end, a series of bad weather days delayed de Rosier, and Blanchard was able to launch first, setting off over the channel with an American scientist named John Jeffries. Separately, I love that at no point has like a British person come anywhere near a balloon. The first balloon flights out of England, the first flight across the channel, English people not involved. They made it about halfway before things went wrong. Their balloon started leaking. With no way to repair it, the two started dumping everything they could over the side, starting with the balloon's ballast, then their lunch, then most of their clothes. Finally, and I have no clue if this actually helped them survive, but it was included in Jeffrey's account of the flight, he suggested they drop the ballast of the body. Quote, "An extra quantity had been secreted by the kidneys, which we might now avail ourselves of by discharging. It didn't hurt, at least." And the two successfully landed in France and became famous. Blanchard got a huge cash prize from the French government and basically got like a stipend for the rest of his life. Jeffries didn't get any cash prize, but he said he was perfectly happy with the admiration of like every woman in France.
I like that their emergency ballast situation was resolved by pissing. Piss like the wind, my good man.
Now, even though he'd lost the race, de Rosier was still being paid to fly and prepared his balloon for the channel crossing. And I'm going to describe this balloon, and you guys let me know if you notice anything weird. His balloon was a new invention of his, designed to bridge the gap between the hot air balloon and gas balloon and get the benefits of both. Basically back then, the hot air balloon, they were much more controllable, but they lacked endurance because you could easily determine your height by changing the fire. Meanwhile, gas balloons could only be controlled by venting gas or dropping ballast, which limited how controllable they could be. The Rosier balloon was a hybrid. It had a large hydrogen balloon on top and a smaller hot air balloon below.
Wait, but also, was this like one of those hot air balloons that has a tiny little hole at the top for heat to get out?
I believe they did have that at the time, but the issue here is that this is a hydrogen balloon with a fire immediately below it.
That's what I'm getting at, yeah. Oh no.
De Rosier Hindenburgs himself very, very early in human history.
Effectively, yeah. This is 2 years after he has first flown. He burns out quick. And a lot of the other aeronauts burn out just as quick.
When you say burnout, do we mean that very literally or?
Literally.
Okay, noted.
So tragically, the obvious thing happened. The gas balloon caught fire and de Rosier was flung to his death. Fun fact, the idea of a hybrid balloon is not actually as dumb as it might seem. All of the extreme distance balloons that people have used to circumnavigate the Earth have followed this design, albeit they use helium instead of hydrogen. And the design today is actually called the Rosier balloon.
Oh, no, it ultimately makes sense in that you have a stable portion and then you can adjust ballast.
Yeah. So another aeronaut was Nadar, or Gaspard Félix Tournachon, who was a French photographer, artist, and balloonist in the 1800s who combined all of his interests together to invent aerial photography. And this was pretty huge at the time. Like, unless a city had a mountain nearby, nobody had ever seen it from above. Nadar's aerial shots basically bridged the gap between the map view and the human view. And Nadar wasn't just interested in aerial photography. He was something of an inventor and a big proponent for the wild idea of heavier-than-air flight. While balloons had been flying for almost 80 years at that point, a machine that flew like a bird was still purely fiction. Even the first experiments with gliders had only started in the 1850s, and Nadar wanted to help fund that research. And his way to do that was to build the world's largest balloon, Le Géant, or the Giant.
No, for real, it looks like they just stitched a small cabin to a balloon.
It is entirely made of, it's still like thatched. It's a wicker basket, but the size of a house. It's 2 stories, and that top part is a balcony. It's fucking huge.
Brother could fit a film development lab in there. Holy.
He had one. Moving on.
Wait, in there?
Forget flying. This is real estate.
Yeah. So this monster balloon was about 200 feet tall and more than 100 feet across. And that was just the balloon part. Quote, "The Giant boasted the most elaborate balloon car ever devised. In fact, to call it a car does it a disservice. It was an airborne cottage. Made of wicker, 2 stories high with a balcony on its roof, it contained 6 compartments, 2 cabins, a printing room, a photographic office, a lavatory, and a storeroom. This is a house. This is a flying house."
If it's a house, does Castle Doctrine apply?
Ooh. All right, but now we're just opening up, if Castle Doctrine exists in the balloon, we're opening up sky piracy and sky burglaries. And I want to see that happen. I want Nadar seems like a cool guy, so I hope it doesn't happen to him, but I want every dipshit French aeronaut to get sky pillaged. We're taking your hydrogen. So when it was unveiled to the public in October 1853, it drew the biggest crowds for a balloon event ever since Jacques Charles' first flight over 80 years before. The first flight did not go well. The balloon was so huge that it took most of the day just to inflate it, and Nadar was forced to entertain the increasingly angry crowd of several 100,000 people. Also, ever since aeronauts became a thing, it was not uncommon for failed balloon launches to turn into literal riots as paying customers demanded a show.
If there's one thing that Parisians do, it's rioting.
When the balloon finally took off in the evening, Nadar, his crew, and the dozen passengers expected an all-night flight over Europe. They'd even brought passports for countries as far away as Russia. Instead, the balloon crashed to the ground just 15 miles from their starting point, and then dragged the cottage cabin on its side for another mile before stopping.
Tragic.
Is everyone just thinking, no, it'll get back in the air any second now?
Look, there's a cliff right there. If we just go off it, we won't fall.
Nadar is just steering the balloon right at it. And if you thought that was bad, the second flight was even worse. The crowd was even bigger this time, estimated at over 500,000 people, with Emperor Napoleon III and the King of Greece also in attendance. Again, it took forever to inflate the balloon, but the ascent went smoothly. The Giant cruised at 4,000 feet over Belgium, then the Netherlands, and into Germany, while the passengers ate and drank on the balcony. By the morning after they left Paris, they'd flown over 400 miles. And then things went wrong.
I want to get drunk in the Giant.
It would be so cool to sit on the balcony and just get drunk and watch Germany go by.
Listen, just getting absolutely tanked on the Giant, some tapas, top-notch time.
But at the same time, it would be utterly terrifying to walk around on the floor of the Giant because it's just made of basket. Every step, there is a real risk you're going through.
It's just creaking so bad.
Yeah, even if it's not creaking, just you step and the floor bends under you and you know that there's 4,000 feet of air.
Meanwhile, it's just gotta be some guy on the ground, some German guy, just bastards, he's getting his gun, I could shoot it down.
Someone absolutely got pissed on at some point by accident.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The lavatory, I guarantee you, was just a hole. So, quote, "As they watched a beautiful sunrise, Nadar, fearing the sun's heat would cause the balloon to burst, ordered a descent. Suddenly, the idyll was transformed into a roller coaster ride as the monster balloon entered strong winds near the ground. They had valved gas so liberally on the way down that they were unable to reascend. The giant bounded across woods and field, tearing through trees and bouncing off the earth. Nadar saw to his dismay that they were on a collision course with a railroad train. A few more revolutions of the wheel and it would all be over, he wrote in a fervid memoir. A single cry escaped our throats, but what a cry. The engineer whistled in reply, stopped the train with feet to spare. Moments later, the runaway balloon finally stopped at the edge of a forest and burst. The passengers, most of whom had jumped or been thrown from the car, were strewn over the ground like so many fallen apples. Several had suffered broken bones, but all, miraculously, survived.
I was expecting more people to die.
I know. Considering everything else that has happened, it almost gets splattered by a train. Would just be the funniest way for 16 people to die.
At this point in time...
What are the odds that happens?
Imagine you're that train conductor. You're just going about your day, and then you see, you've maybe heard of a balloon. If you're really lucky, you've seen one. And there's just the world's biggest balloon is on its side. It is dragging a house right at you.
I can tell you why they weren't injured. The only drunk you can really hit in the 1900s is just thermonuclear, late 1800s.
Oh, yeah, so you're loose body drunk where it protects you. They're just getting rattled around inside the wicker house.
Military balloons.
Men only want two things, and it's disgusting. They want to fuck the balloon, and they want to kill with the balloon.
All right, I'm going to be cremated, and you're going to attach my ash canister to a balloon, and it's going to crash land in an abandoned mall parking lot in downtown Oshawa. My ashes were stabbed.
Gonna put a single knife in your urn.
I don't know about you guys, but I want to go out like the the general at the Netherlands disaster, just in a lawn chair, probably with a drink, and then just Thanos snap
instantly. That also implies that it would be your own fault, because Nadelin was to blame for the Nadelin disaster. That's why it's named after.
I never said I was smart.
Now, if one inevitable human instinct is to look at a new invention and find a way to get horny about it, then the other instinct is inevitably trying to find a way to make that new invention into a weapon. Ever since the Montgolfier balloon had lifted off and Balloonomania swept France, military officers were thinking of ways to use this new technology for war. But, tragically, they didn't have any wars to justify it with. There was an Anglo-French war in 1783, but it ended in the exact same month that the first manned balloons flew. Realizing the potential, though, the Montgolfier brothers themselves tried to pitch the king on using their balloons to conquer Gibraltar. Quote, "By making the balloon's bag large enough, it will be possible to introduce into Gibraltar an entire army which, borne by the wind, will enter right above the heads of the English." Sadly, they didn't get any interest, and the airborne invasion of Gibraltar never materialized. As cool as that would have been.
I joked about this earlier, but just one guy is like, okay, that's terrifying. Shoots out a balloon and the balloon just plummets. It's cool, but you can't defend against that.
Well, another thing is that even gas balloons, these things are surprisingly resistant to gunfire. The thing that makes Zeppelins easy to destroy in World War I is not that they shoot it a lot, but they invent incendiary bullets. If you just shoot a Zeppelin, you're going to put a load of holes in it, but it's going to continue going, and it's kind of the same with these early balloons. A lot of them, especially in military uses, they get shot to Swiss cheese, but they have enough cells inside and they have enough gas that they can still kind of limp home. As far as them just exploding, it doesn't really happen all that much. Not to say it's a good idea to use them as flying APCs though.
What would you call that? Aerial Marines?
The Aeronautical Corps.
Yes.
Okay, well, hold that thought. We are going to get there. Without a conflict to drive the research, the idea of balloons as weapons remained an idea until 1794. By then, France had just come through the French Revolution and was embroiled in the Revolutionary Wars, fighting on all fronts against basically every major power in Europe. After beating back initial invasions from Austria and Prussia, the new French Republic went on the offensive, invading Austrian Netherlands. European history is weird like that. Now, the first person to really try putting balloons on the battlefield was the chemist Jean-Marie Joseph Coutel, and he managed to scrape together enough support and resources to get his balloons sent to the Dutch front for a live-fire test. It did not go well. Not because of any battle, but because the general Coutel had been assigned to, Jourdain, laughed at him and sent him back to Paris, saying, quote, "A battalion is needed more at the front than a balloon."
That sucks, man.
Go back to your clown college.
The officers very pointedly view these guys as clownish. Like a guy shows up in like a weird suit with a balloon. You're just like, no, fuck off. This is for soldiers. Get out.
This is supervillain origin stuff.
They wouldn't let me fly the balloon.
But Coutel did not give up. He returned to Paris determined to prove how useful a balloon could be for the military. He ran some demonstration flights for the government, and these were so successful that he was immediately commissioned as a captain and put in charge of the world's first air force, the French Aerostatic Corps. So Other Chris, you were correct earlier. We were going to get to the Aero Corps.
Yes.
And just in case you thought this trend came later, like the Air Force trend starts right away. As soon as the Corps was formed, they insisted that they get flashier uniforms than the Army to stand out from all of the land-dwelling plebs.
Oh, fuck yeah.
This is 30, like they are 34 people at this time, and they're already just like, yeah, but we have to get nicer stuff.
They wanted some drip.
When they looked at like all the fancy uniforms and were just like, no, ours need to be better.
Let's get some clouds on the sleeves.
Actually, I have these drawings. What if we put like massive gas bags on my chest, 2 of them under the uniform?
Every single Aero Corps member will be caked up.
All of these men descending from the heavens to fight in battle with inflated asses.
So the Corps' first battle was back at Maubeuge. But they got there before the balloon did and had to fight on the front lines. So like they get there, the balloon is not ready, and the general is just like, grab a gun and go. So out of the 34 men in the entire Air Force, 3 of them are killed in that battle. Once the balloon named the Enterprise arrived at Maubeuge, the Corps basically spent the first few flights doing PR, trying to convince the French officers to let them near the front line. So at this point, they were mostly relegated to like behind the lines and test flights. And it works out that they are able to do this. One example is when French soldiers surround Dutch troops in the Belgian city of Charleroi. Coutel takes a general up in the balloon, and with a telescope, he's able to see that the Dutch don't have enough men or supplies to fight a long siege. And this is kind of like vital intelligence that they would not be able to get otherwise. With the help of the Aerostatic Corps, Charleroi falls quickly, and they finally get reassigned to like the real frontline armies invading the Netherlands. The first real use of balloons in battle was the Battle of Fleury in 1794. Again, Coutel takes a general up in the Enterprise where they observe the battle and direct maneuvers that contribute to the battle being a massive victory for the French. But they get snubbed.
They didn't get shot?
They didn't get shot. And you can see the picture there of the Battle of Fleury. And yeah, they're just kind of like observing from above. See, after the battle, the generals involved basically write about how the balloon was useless, and they just ignored all the messages that came down the cable. Quote, "The truth is, this balloon was just plain embarrassing. We were no better informed, and no one paid any attention to it, neither the enemy nor ourselves."
So it didn't even serve as a distraction.
Yeah, like all of the Dutch troops are also just like let's ignore those idiots. There is actually some writing where like Dutch POWs, when they're asked about it, they basically say that like they thought the balloon was cheating and that it was unsporting.
And at this point, like no one has a gun up there, right? No one's like shooting down or like dropping bombs.
Nobody else has them.
No, the only use, like balloons at this point are purely observation. Yeah, you send someone up there, they have a couple of like pieces of paper and they send that down, like the balloon is tethered. So it's like there's a line and you can send messages down that line and you can effectively tell them like, hey, those like the left flank is open, stuff like that. And this kind of happens for the entire Aerostatic Corps' whole existence. They've got the support of the French government in Paris, and they keep getting assigned to help out with these battles, but they can't actually force the generals in charge to use them. Most of whom are like, they're very skeptical of these balloons. So over and over, they get sent to battles, and then they just like they get assigned as infantry. The balloons don't get built. They're like none of the generals are actually convinced to use these things. Napoleon is actually a great example of this. When he invaded Egypt, he was assigned a unit from the Aerostatic Corps, but he hated the balloons so much that he left them packed up on the ships when they got ashore, and that those ships were later sunk by the British Navy. And the troops were just integrated into the rest of the French army, presumably wearing really nice uniforms. And then when he returned to France in 1799, he hated the balloons so much that he shut down the Aerostatic Corps completely, had all of their balloons destroyed, and closed the only ballooning school in France. He then made it a law that the French military would never use balloons again.
Man, that sucks.
He is salty.
He has denied, like Napoleon, the military genius, denies his country the most advanced military observation tool in history up to that point because he doesn't like it.
So this would have helped it say Waterloo to see the Prussians coming. Hey, go figure.
Very possibly.
He is like epic trad based, not horny for balloons.
No, he has his wife and he likes her exactly the way she is, non-inflated.
She doesn't know about the closet, though.
The balloons make him think of other women, so they have to go. While military ballooning in France was effectively dead, the armies that the Aerostatic Corps had been deployed against actually learned the right lessons and formed balloon units of their own. In 1849, during the Italian War of Independence, Austrian balloons carried out the world's first air raid over Venice. The damage to the city was basically nothing, and many Austrian balloons accidentally bombed their own positions. However, there's still a lot of writing that like the propaganda and like the morale blow of this like balloon air raid was huge on the city. For the first effective use of military balloons, we have to go to America.
Hell yeah.
When the American Civil War kicked off in 1861, the Union Army had to deal with a very unique kind of volunteer, stuntmen aeronauts who, out of patriotism or just fame-seeking, offered up their balloons as observation posts. And most of these guys get lost in the bureaucratic nightmare of Washington, like, instantly. One of them, Professor Thaddeus Lowe, is able to get his balloon approved, but only because he's friends with the Treasury Secretary, who sets him up with a personal meeting with Lincoln. And proving that this kind of thing doesn't just happen to dictators like Khrushchev, Lincoln is immediately spellbound by a charismatic inventor and aeronaut, and like throws his full support behind balloons. He is balloon pilled instantly.
Hell yeah.
We got the used car salesman energy, boy.
This is like the one. This is like the one historic balloon guy I sort of know about, because he was just like you said, he was a hustler. He knew what to do. He was actually a good balloonist in a sense, but he was just like, I'm going to use my connections and get a balloon job in the military.
And one of the very interesting thing about these aeronauts is that like piloting a balloon is not the toughest part of an aeronaut's job. Like all of these guys are salesmen. They are showmen. They know, like they are ultimately entertainers. So much of they all have a load of experience with convincing people, getting money out of people, finding like networking, finding the right person to talk to. So when this war breaks out, they are, a lot of them are very able to like navigate the procurement nightmare around Washington.
Why did I just have the mental image of an Academy/Blackwater Balloon Corps?
Just quickly repainting my balloon every time we do an atrocity accidentally.
Freebooting across like Central America, but it's via balloon.
Free ballooning.
Free floating. We invade by the sky. We make it part of America. Give me all this money and I will do it.
Now, despite that smart political maneuvering, Lowe ran into some more problems. First off, he was not the only competing aeronaut for the Union's balloon contract. While he'd networked his way in, another balloonist named John Wise had simply undercut him, offering to build the Army balloons $200 cheaper than Lowe's. And this turned into a weird competition in the lead up to the First Battle of Bull Run because things are just so hectic, like getting the Union Army organized, that they just say like, all right, both of you guys bring your balloons. We'll see whose works out better. And so both Lowe and Wise, they take their balloons, they go down there and they try and do live fire demos. Wise was given the first try, but his balloon tore itself to shreds on some tree branches. Seeing his chance, Lowe rushed his balloon into the air, but he was too late. So history heads might know that the First Battle of Bull Run was a massive failure for the Union, and as Lowe drifted towards retreating American troops, they thought he was a Confederate and shot his balloon into Swiss cheese. So not a great showing for the Union balloon effort. Then, when he made it back to Washington, Lowe ran into the same problem that the French had 50 years earlier. While he was able to convince the government to fund his balloons, the generals wanted nothing to do with him. General Winfield Scott believed balloons were, quote, of little use, and refused to even see Lowe when he went to the Army headquarters. And it's written up in a very fun way where, like, an aide, when Lowe shows up, an aide basically holds him off for, like, the better part of a day by just going, like, sorry, he's busy. Can you come back in an hour? He comes back in an hour. Sorry, he's eating right now. Can you come back in an hour? He comes back. Sorry, he's sleeping. Can you come back tomorrow?
Sorry, he's got a debilitating case of ligma.
Every like the perfect junior officer who's just able to like keep someone away from the senior officer for like as long as possible. So basically, confronted with these generals not taking him seriously, Lowe pulled the one card he had left. He whined to the White House.
There it is.
Quote, Lincoln straightaway donned his stovepipe hat and escorted the frustrated aeronaut to Scott's headquarters, where they were received with promptness and courtesy. 1 week later, Lowe was installed as a regular Union balloonist, with a generous wage of $10 per day, and he was authorized to construct a reconnaissance balloon at the government's expense. Lincoln holds his hand and walks him back and says, like, this is my special boy. You need to you need to take him seriously.
You were mean to my bestie.
You were mean to my balloon boy. And here is what he built, the Intrepid. Nick, can you describe what you're seeing on this slide for the audience? Specifically, what's on the other side of this balloon?
I'm looking at that portrait. This goes hard.
This is like what every general should have behind them in any modern war. Like telegram logic, stop. Intrepid, stop.
Why is it Intrepid, period?
I don't know why there's a period at the end of Intrepid. I'm loving what's on the other side of this balloon. Like, this to me is the 1800s equivalent of America, fuck yeah.
No, I'm just imagining, you're just some poor Confederate dipshit and you just see this on the horizon. That portrait just boring into you.
So, audience, for context, if you're listening to this is a portrait of General McClellan, 20 feet across, and it's being held in the beak of an eagle with 2 huge flags flying out behind it.
This is the only cool thing involving General McClellan ever.
God help you if it was ever Sherman on that flag.
See, the funniest thing for me as a Canadian is that I know nothing about the Civil War. So I vaguely know a couple of generals' names, but I never got that education of which ones were smart and which ones were dipshits.
This is where I get to plug my family history of being directly related to a Union general on my mother's side. Alexander Hayes.
Was it McClellan?
No, it wasn't McClellan. Alexander Hayes, a.k.a. one of Ulysses S. Grant's besties.
The mental image of just having that photo staring you down as a Confederate soldier, just perfect.
Yeah, and you can also see he's got the gas generator for it, because these are all hydrogen balloons, which means that operating them is A, incredibly dangerous, and B, it takes so much time to get these things inflated. They have to be prepared days in advance of a battle. So, the Union Army Balloon Corps, as the various hired aeronauts came to be known, was the world's first effective use of military aircraft. At the Battle of Fair Oaks, aerial reconnaissance was vital in turning a crushing Union defeat into a stalemate. They also participated in the battles of Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. Now, I know that might not be a ringing endorsement, because history buffs will also know that both of those battles were pretty bad defeats for the Union, and the balloons did not turn those around. However, from everything I've been able to find, they were still useful. So, another fun thing that the Balloon Corps did was that they also invented the world's first aircraft carrier, turning an old coal barge into the USS George Washington Parke Custis and launching spotter balloons off of its deck.
Okay, that's actually pretty cool.
That rules.
Oh, hell yeah. This goes hard.
Now, the Confederacy also had its own balloon program, but they were nowhere near as effective as the Unions. A combination of lack of experience and the Union blockade of materials meant that their balloons were like patchwork nightmares made out of just whatever silk they had lying around. Of the 3 Confederate balloons, 1 crashed and 2 were captured by the Union.
Was there a balloon-to-balloon fight, as far as you know?
Not as far as I know. I believe World War I would have been the first opportunity for that.
That would have been so cool.
Although the earliest air battles with like airplanes were just dudes with pistols shooting at each other.
Which also is cool as hell.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would love like a 1906 Ace Combat game. That would be incredibly fun to me. And like the mega weapon is just Nadar's Le Géant.
But it's just like 10 guys with muskets in there.
With muskets, yeah. So the Civil War was also useful to look at because it's the first time that ballooning becomes like a formal military thing. Up to that point, it had always been showman aeronauts who volunteered for fame or fortune. They were hotshot civilian pilots, not used to taking orders, and over the course of the war, the biggest cause of casualties in the Balloon Corps was boredom. Aeronauts like John Wise, John LaMountain, and James Allen quit out of frustration. Thaddeus Lowe resigned after his pay was cut. Despite their reputation as showboats, some of the aeronauts did actually seem to care about their work and helping the war effort. For them, the problem was like resistance from military officers. John Starkweather wrote to Lowe, quote, "I have not had any orders from the general. You say you are anxious for every member of the aeronautics department should render all valuable service possible. I am anxious to do the same. all I want is the chance. So like you kind of wind up with a mix of these guys. Like some of them actually want to do their part and they're stymied by officers telling them to fuck off. Some of them, like Lowe, just want a fuckload of money. And as soon as they don't get that money, they're just like, all right, I no longer care about my country. With pilots dropping out and balloons tainted by their association to lost battles, the Union Army Balloon Corps was shut down in 1863, about 2 full years before the end of the war. So I know you guys may have been expecting like balloon history, military history to be all these like shining examples when every single example so far has been a pretty huge failure, and has ended with like the country in question shutting down their program before the end of the war.
Man, this sucks. Get your stupid balloons out of here, buddy.
There's like one guy in like 1864 who's like, no, guys, just give me a balloon, I can win this for you. Just holds a grudge the entire war.
Pack it up, nerd. Get out of here.
He's like drunk, muttering himself, like, I could have flown into Richmond and captured it. I could have done that.
All right, I now need like an Assassin's Creed where you like airdrop your way in a balloon and assassinate all the leaders
it's just like those Spec Ops guys like fast rope out of like the secret helicopters, but it's just like you throw down the rope, you go up a balloon with like the one-shot musket on your back.
Sherman,
you're wearing a night vision headset that's just 3 candles held above your face.
Sherman using the balloon corps to firebomb Confederate cities.
Again, history would have been so much cooler if everyone had just embraced this cool thing. Now, the last thing I want to talk about will tie everything back together. It's a story of balloons, daring aeronauts, an entranced public, soldiers, and France. Have you guys ever heard of the Paris balloon lift?
No.
I can't say I have.
So a little earlier, we talked about how early difficulties with using balloons for spotting caused Napoleon to disband France's only balloon unit and ban any further military balloon experiments. Well, as France willingly shot itself in the foot, its enemies did not follow suit. And while America's military balloons in the Civil War had a mixed reputation, foreign observers went back to Europe convinced that balloons could be made to work. When the Franco-Prussian War started in 1870, Prussia had 2 balloon units and used them effectively in the siege of Strasbourg. When Prussian units reached and encircled Paris, balloons were used to pick targets for their super long-range artillery. Effectively, Paris was on the receiving end of a technology that had first been demonstrated above its own streets. And with the city completely cut off, balloons became actually an unlikely hope for thousands of trapped Parisians.
I love how the balloon just can continue to haunt Napoleon.
Yeah, like, and this is now haunting his grandson. Man, I want to use those fucking observation thingies that the Prussians are using, but Grandpa said no. Guess I'm just gonna lose.
Like, if Napoleon just embraced balloons, he could have done an aerial invasion of England, and we would never end up in a situation where his grandson is getting destroyed by the very thing that his grandfather hated. Like, it just goes back to that moment. This is the history.
You could have just flown over Waterloo. Why even fight?
No, you could have seen Blucher via the balloons. It would have solved everything.
So enter the Paris balloon lift. With telegraph lines cut, there was no way for anyone inside to talk to the rest of France. So, like, Paris is fully encircled and besieged at this point. There is no way for the government to coordinate, no way for the military to plan a breakthrough, no way for normal people even to just, like, send letters to their families. As the Prussians closed in, a bunch of different methods were tried. So way back in our rocket mail episode, we talked about homemade French rockets carrying like propaganda to Prussian troops and trying to like launch mail clear over their lines. But what actually worked was balloons. Starting in September of 1870, dozens of ramshackle balloons lifted off from Paris and floated over the Prussian lines, braving the winds and like literal rain of bullets just to get free. Most of them carried mail and carrier pigeons, so like the pigeons were how the messages would get back to Paris. But a few evacuated government officials out of the besieged city. And this is some like Leningrad vibes. Unlike the first balloons over Paris, these ones were not impressive or nicely decorated. Teams of seamstresses worked brutal shifts to build them out of whatever spare silk and clothing could be found, while volunteer pilots were given literal crash courses on the very basics of not dying while flying a balloon. One of the instructors and lead organizers of this was actually Nadar, the aerial photographer from earlier.
Hey, our boy makes an appearance.
He keeps winning, man.
He knows all about crashing balloons. What you can see in this illustration here, that is Paris's train station, and 2 of these massive buildings were turned over to just being balloon factories. Like, if you've ever heard those stories of Soviet T-34s rolling off the assembly line directly into the fighting, this is the exact same vibe, and this has exactly the same build quality.
This is reverse Dien Bien Phu. The French are surrounded. Instead of airdropping into like enemy territory, they're flying out from their own territory.
They're making balloons out of their own uniforms and flying out of the encirclement.
Mad. They're just like throwing empty wine bottles down.
And again, like, these are not safe balloons. One volunteer aeronaut described his balloon like this, quote, "There were holes big enough for my little finger to pass through, a whole constellation of punctures. This is no longer a balloon. It is a skimmer."
But it worked. If it's dumb and it works, it works.
It did work. To make matters worse, the Prussians got wise to the balloon trick and started to build counters, like the Krupp balloon gun, the world's first anti-aircraft weapon.
This is reverse Dien Bien Phu.
It is.
Time is a flat circle.
And again, like, France has not used balloons up to this point. The siege of Paris lasts 4 months. Krupp is able to get this thing out the door within those 4 months of like, hey, the French have started using balloons again. Let's shoot them the fuck down. And again, these are not like veteran aeronauts or even soldiers. These are just volunteers from Paris who are told, like, pull this to go up, pull this to go down, try and go out, like, try and get away from Paris and then just crash. And like, there's a capital in exile where the French government is. What they're trying to do is they're trying to relay messages to them.
Their balloon just launches out of Paris, immediately crashes, and they are just swamped by Prussians that just beat the shit out of them.
Angry Prussian dudes.
I want to make sure I'm looking at this gun right, the Krupp balloon gun. It's basically just like a big rifle on a swivel on like a platform to move around.
That is exactly what it is. It's a giant, it's like, it looks to be like 20 or 30 millimeters. It's breech loading, doesn't really seem to have a magazine. And yeah, like, in order to fire this thing up, the pedestal is not big enough. Like, the guy has to like hunker and like crouch down uncomfortably.
Just like the French guy giving the longest insult possible is he's flying away in the balloon and then just gets no scope, like just dead in the head. And the guy in the balloon next to him is like, mad.
Now, despite everything facing them, from September 1870 to January 1871, 66 balloons took off from Paris. 5 were shot down or fell in enemy lines, and 2 were just flat out swept out to sea and never seen again. While France ultimately surrendered and Prussian troops paraded through Paris, the airlift was still a massive success that allowed the French government and military to organize for about a third of a year. More so than any other battle, it showed how useful aircraft could be. And France learned a vital lesson from the siege. That same year, they reopened the balloon school that Napoleon had shut down 70 years before. And that, guys, is the story of Balloonomania. How do we all feel?
Inflated.
Kind of deflated because I was expecting way more like Crimson Skies, Ace Combat stuff. I was not expecting weird horniness, weird xenophobia, and just like the Uno reverse card of the Prussians hating the French with that.
I came into this expecting the weird horniness, and that was about half of the episode. So
I think at the end of the day, we do get down to the 2 instincts that humans have with new inventions, which is A, get horny about it, and B, use it to kill people.
Yeah, we were talking about this a while back, like a lot of stuff about the balloons I know is 20th century stuff and the weirdness there, and I could not have guessed any of this.
And we will also definitely be talking more about balloons, like in the near future. I think you said that you were interested in coming back for that, right?
Totally. I would love to.
Awesome. So in that case, this effectively gets us to the start of the 1900s. So then the next part, audience, we will be going over, it won't be sequential, as in the next episode, but we will be talking about like 1900s onward because balloons get so stupid.
I think you mean amazing.
I kind of do.
I'm looking forward to it, actually.
Slide 32, we're going to get to talk about Project Manhigh at some point. Like the god that is Joe Kittinger.
Here's rock.
Yes. When Felix Baumgartner does this, he's got everything perfectly like custom and whatnot. That is a toolbox taped to Joe Kittinger's ass under his parachute, just with like his extra equipment.
Yes, Diva versus Hey Guys, Watch This.
Also, he throttles himself on the way down. His canopy gets like wrapped around his neck and he's unconscious for a good chunk of it. It's fun times. But yeah, so we talked about the first balloons. We talked about the first balloon celebrities and how they all died. We talked about the horniness.
The horniness continued.
Yeah, we talked about Paris basically doing Stalingrad, but for balloons, or reverse Dien Bien Phu. So yeah, I had a fun time with this. If you guys did, I think it was.
I had a lot of fun.
This was so much fun. I hope I was at least useful.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. I can't wait to talk about like how dumb it gets in the 20th century.
Remember, children, float and dethrone God.
That should be a T-shirt. That should be a pin. That should be a poster.
Yeah,
it should be a poster of just like the dead guy, the dead balloon crash.
Listen, I need that on a trucker cap.
It's just Pilatre de Rosier doing the Family Guy death pose as like the Hindenburg burns behind him. I lit my hydrogen balloon on fire, brackets, I'm an inventor.
I want one where it's the Polish skeleton floating into the air with the Polish balloon, and then it's floating.
Listen, you can't just say that. I now have beer in my nose, and it sucks.
So, Nicholas, where can people find your work?
So I'm a contributing editor at Task and Purpose. You can read me weekly there. I also write occasionally for the New Republic, the American Prospect, and I'm in the process of finally reviving my newsletter, Let's Do the Panic Again, where I write about all the things that give me anxiety. War, climate change, inequality, awfulness, also movies.
Awesome.
The Great Balloon Panic of 2023.
Honestly, yes. Didn't we have one like a couple of weeks ago too?
Yeah, it turned out to be nothing, but for a good like 3 hours before the Pentagon said it was nothing, everyone was like, it's happening again.
Excuse me?
I lost track of that one.
Was it actually nothing, as in it wasn't there, or just like?
No, it was a balloon, but it was like just a harmless balloon.
Okay.
Let's be real. Out of the balloons that got shot down last year, I mean, like one turned out to literally be a hobby balloon from Illinois.
Yeah. Although the pictures of the actual spy balloon, like I remember looking at that thing and just, it looked so cool. It had like the huge solar arrays off at the side. There was like this huge gantry
that thing was
on it.
friggin' Titanic.
Regardless of purpose, the engineering of that thing fucking rocked.
I mean, I might be totally mixing up the case of it off the top of my head. I can't have it in front of me, but there was that photo taken by the Dragon Lady spy plane. The guy who took the selfie of it, through the cockpit with a balloon behind him. I think it was the spy balloon.
Yeah. And you've got the shadow of the plane on the balloon. Oh, that was so cool. I do kind of hope that like this, the people flying up there to look at it were more professional and less panicked, because like that would just be a load of, like, if my day was I get to fly the Cold War spy plane up to look at the balloon, that would be fun.
I mean, like, think about it. The F-22 pilots who got shit all those down. Like, they got to have the coolest day.
Or you get made fun of for the rest of your career because you have, like, you're making ace with a bunch of fucking balloons.
It's like Top Gun Maverick comes out and does like Top Gun Maverick just comes out doing action shit and it's like, I got a balloon.
You're at a birthday party, one of the little like helium balloons gets away and everyone's just like, burn, look, get it, kill it.
That rules.
And thank you, audience, for listening to another episode of Failure to Float. If you enjoyed this, we do also have a Patreon. If you join at any tier, you get access to our monthly bonus episodes where we will be reviewing, for now, bad Soviet space movies.
Thank you to everyone who has signed up to support the show, and a big shout out to our top tier patrons. Our cyborg cats are Antifa Kronk, Boss, Matt, Leaf Goose, and Spectre Cohen. Our space dogs are Ben L, Fractal Moonlight, Furious Luddite, John C, Oliver, Bart, Tom M, Winter Goddess, and Zim.
Albert count 8.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Failure to Launch. If you want to follow us, we are Failure to Launch on Blue Sky and FT Launch Pod on Instagram. We also post our episodes with visual aids at Failure to Launch Podcast on YouTube. All music was provided by DJ Danner.